brilliant to see this chapel once again filled with colleagues from across the university. My name is Abby Williams, and I'm the Associate Head of Research and Innovation for the Humanities Division. And my main role today is just to welcome you here, to say that I hope that you find this as stimulating and rich a display of the kind of work and ideas and partnerships as we have in Torch over the course of the past year and couple of years that this activity has been emerging. I'm going to hand over now to Christine Gerard, who's the Director of Torch, who's just going to explain a bit about what we're going to be hearing and seeing, and to welcome you more formally. But on behalf of the Humanities Division, I just welcome you here, and I hope you enjoy the next couple of hours. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby, for that warm welcome. So I'm Christine Gerard. As Abby said, I'm Director of Torch, which is a fantastic opportunity. During the course of the next hour or two, not quite 2 hours, we will be offering you a series of presentations which will illustrate the exciting range of interdisciplinary and international projects and seed funding schemes that Torch sponsors and supports. So we have the full range today. We have presentations from one of our 5 interdisciplinary research hubs, that is from Medical Humanities, from the Ancient Anatolia Network, one of our 2-year research networks, from one of our critical thinking communities, a scheme for graduates to get together around thought-provoking and innovative ideas, and this one is the Ars Memoriae. We will hear from our new global visiting professor, Professor Fouzia Farooq. We will also hear from Torch's partnership with the British Film Institute, and then from one of our community-based projects with ARC-T in Cowley. And then from 2 projects hosted by Torch, one of which is due to burst into life very shortly, Fantasy Futures, and the other is Conversational Learning. All these projects, in their different ways, bring together researchers from across academic disciplines, sharing their approaches with partners outside the university, including local communities, IROs, that is independent research organisations, and of course global researchers and their institutions. And I think this event today is a really great way to start off this year. It feels very timely because this time next year we'll all be heading off into the Schwarzman Centre together, and there will be many more opportunities for interdisciplinary and public-facing research. So this is an exciting moment and you are all a part of it. Thank you. And I will now welcome Professor Erica Charters, who is the academic lead for our Medical Humanities Research Hub. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be starting off these research talks. So as mentioned, my name is Erica Charters. I'm professor of the Global History of Medicine based in the History faculty, but I'm also the academic lead of one of Torch's research hubs, which is Medical Humanities. So what is medical humanities? I'm not going to get into a lengthy philosophical debate, fear not, but basically medical humanities takes methodologies, especially from the humanities and the social sciences, and applies it to issues surrounding medicine, whether that be disease or health or other aspects. So this includes history of disease, it includes philosophy of medicine, it also includes things such as sociological approaches to thinking about what is medical authority and what is medical expertise. I think we're very lucky in a place such as the University of Oxford, where we have so many and such a vibrant range of colleagues, of centers, and of institutes that work on these topics. And so the role of the Medical Humanities Hub is really to promote and to support this research, to help advertise it, and also to really help the interdisciplinarity that's needed, and especially to encourage people to work across the divisions within the university. We have a wonderful steering committee that helps us do this. I should note that this This is a little bit out of date. We've just updated, but basically we now have someone from GLAM as well. And our aim is to have an academic from every humanities department, but also to have people who are based in the social sciences. So we have medical anthropology, we have medical geography, and we also have people who are based within the medical division. And these people get to come together, discuss research that's going on within their departments and centers, and again, encourage the creation of networks and relationships across disciplines and divisions. This slide just captures a few of the events and the activities and the projects that we've been hosting and promoting over the past few months. I'll just highlight a few of them for you. Of course, we very recently supported the cultural program, its new Adventures in Consciousness series. If you haven't seen the flyers or signed up for some of those events that are being rolled out across the city in this next term, I hope you really do. Some really fantastic things going on there. We've also just finished hosting an AFOX fellow, so someone who's a medical geographer and an epidemiologist who came to us from Nigeria, who's working on what's called the COVID-19 Africa paradox. And this is the question of why Africa, compared to other parts of the world, but also contrary to most people's expectations, was less severely affected by COVID than elsewhere. So he was working with historians, with social scientists, with philosophers, also with epidemiologists to answer this research question. And I think this really captures how we need this kind of multidisciplinary research in order to properly understand the pattern of pandemics. Also, I think drawing out of COVID, we had various research groups and activities related to pandemic preparedness through issues such as antimicrobial resistance. And one of the things I think that's crucial to highlight here is that without the insights from the social sciences and the humanities, it's very difficult to tackle these problems of health, right? How do you communicate issues? How do you change people's minds? This is by bringing together researchers from those different areas. So we very much see humanities expertise as important in its own right. We also sometimes use humanities expertise in some ways as a kind of check on medicine when we think about, say, the purpose of medical ethics. But more often than not, we're working in partnership with people doing medical research because we think that we need these different disciplinary approaches and this broad knowledge in order to actually get medical activities running successfully on the ground. I want to end with just one project among many that we're supporting at the moment. And this is part of a broader theme that we've been able to support thanks to the funding of the FEL Fund. And this is looking in part at global health, public health, and community health across the university and in research. Obviously, all of those areas are actually based within medicine, but I think you'll note by the topics themselves how much we need humanities and social science research in order to properly conduct that research. So who is the global, who is the public, who are the local and communities that we're working with? So as one of the projects that's come out of this funding is called Oxfordshire Health Humanities, and we're working in partnership with Oxfordshire County Council. Oxfordshire County Council has been running a number of public health programs focused on the 10 most deprived wards within Oxfordshire. Obviously, on average, you will know that Oxfordshire is a healthy and very wealthy environment, but this average actually tends to hide what are actually quite stark disparities within the county. So you might not know, but there's actually a 14-year gap between the average life expectancy between the healthiest and the least healthiest parts just within Oxfordshire. So we're working within those wards, and not just, I know many of us are aware of course, Blackbird Leys, but also working within areas of what we might call rural areas of poverty. And what Oxfordshire County Council has done is they've initiated really innovative bottom-up community activities. You'll see a few examples of their community health development officers in a workshop that we hosted not too long ago, just next door in the Torch building. And so they work with local communities to help co-design and then implement community health activities that are thinking about long-term preventative health, but are also thinking about how to break down those barriers, those social and cultural barriers that we think are so important in thinking about communities and thinking about what kind of healthy objectives and lifetime ambitions they want to achieve. So this project brings together health economists, historians, anthropologists, all to think about this long-term context of health, and also to think about the long-term and cultural context to why people might distrust their local authorities and their health authorities and their local doctors. In the background, you might be able to make out, this is Henry Ackland's map of Oxford from the 19th century. Ackland later became the Regius Professor of Medicine here at the university. He also studied the rates of cholera in this city. Interestingly, he was not looking at sources of water, but instead he looked at elevation rates, and he also looked at sanitation methods and tied those to the incidence of cholera in 19th century Oxford. And of course, what hasn't changed is it was the poorest neighborhoods in Oxford who, of course, had the highest rates of disease. So this project, we're actually taking global health methodologies and applying them to Oxfordshire community health. And this is partly because we think these methods are most relevant, but it's also to us a research question of thinking about what is global health and where is it located? Is Oxford and Oxfordshire actually part of global health? Are we part of the global? But also a broader question about us as researchers and our relationship to the communities around us. Are we actually part of global health? And is global health always thinking about other communities? What is our relationship within that research? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Erica. That was great. So could we now welcome up to the podium Shivani, Malavika and Smriti, please, who together form the organisers of the Ars Memoriae critical thinking community. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks to Torch for having us today. I'm Shivani, and these are my colleagues Malavika and Smriti. And today we're here to represent Ars Memoriae, the Memory Studies Reading Group. So we were fortunate enough to be granted the Torch Critical Thinking Community Fund last academic year. And here's what we've been up to since then. So we started in Hillary term 2024. So that's January of this year. And we started this reading group with the aim of promoting and generating awareness about memory studies. Memory studies, as some of you might know, is a very interdisciplinary field, and it's a rapidly growing and upcoming field. And we identified a lack of memory studies research in Oxford and decided to fill that gap. Our main aim was to promote memory studies not as a discipline, but as a way of thinking, and we wanted to share this with as many people as possible. So how did we do this? We decided that we would do it in the form of a reading group so that people can come together and understand what memory studies is all about. So we synthesized memory studies scholarship with purposeful cultural analysis, and in the next slide, we'll see how we did that. And we wanted to create a space where everyone could reflect on the role and purpose of memory in their own research, in their personal and professional lives, and more importantly, think clearly and critically about contemporary issues in the world. And we were able to create a space to talk about many issues, and many people did tell us that they were glad they got to open up about them because they didn't find many spaces in the university that gave them that kind of freedom. Now, my colleague Smriti will take over.
For our reading group sessions, we started in Hillary and Trinity term, and we did sessions in weeks 2, 4, 6, and 8. And we basically read texts together. So we looked at 4 different texts across different genres. We had Yoko Ogawa's The Memory Police. We had Amitav Ghosh's The Shadow Lines, Tennessee Williams' The Glass Menagerie, and Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. And we had a variety of people from different disciplines join us. I think we had people from like economics, even other humanities faculties, but also people from sciences who were interested in how memory works. And each text we had was paired with memory studies scholarship in order to facilitate discussions. So we had a lot of secondary material that we drew upon in our sessions. Apart from that, adopting a multimodal approach, we also looked at memory in paintings, and we also discussed memory politics behind famous monuments, including Mount Rushmore, the African Renaissance Monument in Senegal, and Valle de Cuelgamuros. I apologize for my pronunciation. For our marquee event in Trinity term last academic year, we had writer Sally Bailey do a performance and reading for us from her trilogy. Yeah. And now Malvika will talk about our future plans. Thank you.
So we have come to the best part, that is how far we have come so long and where we are heading with this. Thank you. So our participants were from, as Smriti mentioned, from across the various strands of humanities division as well as science, and facilitating enthusiastic, meaningful discussions about the function of memory in today's world. For instance, we got several visiting fellows of OCLU, Oxford Center for Life Writing, English, Philosophy, International Relations, Political Science, Neuroscience, Economics, History faculty. They were active participants in our sessions. We co-designed and taught an 8-week module entitled Walls of Memory for a visiting student as a part of Worcester College's Visiting Student Program, VSP. Moving forward, we are looking forward to organize events in collaboration with other torch networks and student groups across the university. For instance, this term in Michaelmas 2024, we are doing a collaborative symposium with Queer Intersections of Oxford, another group. And for Michaelmas term, that is 2024, we'll be reading Persepolis in week 3, 4, 6, and 8 through the lens of memory, exile, as well as looking at a host of short films. So please come to our sessions. It will be held at the Radcliffe Humanities, the building right across this, at 5:15. Follow us on Twitter and find our website for more information and updates. And these are some pictures from our sessions. Find this, notice this signpost. Trust me, they were much better in our mobile phones, but yep, that's our mail ID. So if you want to ask something, we are happy to answer as quick as possible. And that's our Twitter. That's where we are more active. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Torch. And we look forward to your continued support.
Thank you for that. That was a wonderful picture of Sally Bailey wearing very bright clothes, which is what she normally does. I think that she's actually coming to speak at one of our book at lunch times this year, which is going to be good. So we're ahead of our time, which is good. And so now it's my pleasure to invite up to the podium representatives of the Ancient Anatolia network, which is, I think, a fabulous entity. And we have, I think, Michaela. And do we also have Philomene as well? No, it's just so Michaela Bianconi, who will speak to this. Thank you so much.
So I'm Michele Bianconi, and I'm in between linguistics and classics, but I also have interest in ancient Near Eastern studies, and sort of my interest and the interest of the very many other academics who are part of the network in a way are reflected in that. So we are an interdisciplinary, again, I'm so glad that this word is coming up so much today, network for the promotional Anatolian studies, basically everything that concerns the territory, more or less, of what today is Turkey, but until the end of antiquity. And we are, I'm myself a linguist, but within our network, we have people interested in all aspects, basically all of the humanities. And this is just a non-comprehensive list of disciplines that are included in our network, which so far is Oxford-based, as and only Oxford-based in a way, as the constituency of torch networks are. But we have about 20 Oxford-based members and student members as well. And one of the miraculous things that this network allowed us to do was to put together, in a way, a mailing list of interested people who signed up for it, which now amounts to more than 600 members, which is quite incredible, given that Anatolian studies is a rather endangered discipline, so to say. You might think, how is it endangered? Is more than 20 of you work on that? Well, we're from all over the place, but there's no chair, no position in Anatolian studies. We're all doing all sorts of disciplines and have an interest, scientific interests in that. And just to give you an idea, Oxford is one of the 2 places where you can learn the Anatolian languages in the whole country, and there's no permanent post for that either. The other place being UCL, full stop. However, the topic is of growing interest because of the new discoveries in the field, and what we try to do with this network is to promote the field in all sorts of ways, by organizing internal seminars, by organizing public lectures. We organized the first ever summer school in Anatolian languages and linguistics. I'll say something more about it in a second. outreach days. We had the first Ancient Anatolia Day. I have a couple of pictures of that later on as well. And the goal basically is to build partnerships, foster collaboration with anyone who's interested, really, research institutes, individuals, members of the public, and of course promote the study of this, again, underrepresented discipline within Oxford as well. Some of the things we have done, I should say some highlights. We have an up and running seminar, which is hybrid. One of our, in a way, characteristics of our network is to we want to make this as accessible as possible. The only seminar on ancient Anatolia. It meets a couple of times per term. We follow Oxford terms, but of course we try to be inclusive and do them all at later times in the day so that people can watch, can tune in. In most part of the world, it's always hard to make everyone happy, but we try our best. We usually have about 30 people in person, which is a fairly good, for the field, fairly good attendance, but again, quite a few people worldwide. And one thing I'm particularly proud of is that the Anatolia seminar has in a way become unofficially the main hub for new discoveries. Now, Anatolian, again, as I said, Anatolian studies are a bit underrepresented, but it's also a field where new things happen and they're pretty cool. One example I have from last year, a new language was discovered just on a clay tablet in the capital of the Hittites. And we had a launch, as it were, the first paper on this language by two experts from Germany. And we had it right there, right next door, the third floor of the Humanities building at the seminar. And since then, we've had more and more, in a way, when there's a big discovery, either we get in touch with people or they get in touch with us saying, can we talk about that at this seminar? Because we have such a big broadcasting. And this, again, all thanks to the resources of Torch. And this has been really, really amazing. I mentioned, yes, the summer school we organized. Some data is there. It was quite, for an event of its kind with about 100 participants, that was quite successful. And again, it showed the appetite for the discipline, and it also raised awareness across the world, as it were, for so-called minor disciplines, which maybe shouldn't be considered minor anymore. And again, thanks to the help of Wolfson College and a number of sponsors as well, we were able to organize the Ancient Anatolia Day, a big outreach event which featured classes for the public, clay tablet making workshops, and even a musical performance where we flew in a musician who reconstructed ancient instruments and played them. That was really lots of fun. What's next? Well, the network is running as all networks have a limited lifespan, but we hope that the official end of the network won't be the end of this endeavor. The hope is to use this in a way as a springboard, and I'm very pleased to report that other institutions outside of Oxford have expressed clear interest in collaborating on this, both in the UK, I'm thinking of the Institute of Classical Studies, and some American universities as well. And already next term, which will be the last term of the network, our seminar will be in collaboration officially with UCLA, which is pretty interesting. American colleagues have expressed the will to do something similar there as well. So there's a bit of a domino effect, which is very, very pleasing. But hopefully, indeed, we want to carry on with these activities and build more partnerships with all sorts of institutions and individuals, both in the UK and abroad. And we're extremely grateful for the springboard that Torch has given us. And these are a couple of photos from the summer school on top and the Ancient Anatolia Day at the bottom. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Now it's my great pleasure to invite to the podium our new global visiting professor, Fouzia Farooq, and she will come to give us a presentation on her novel in progress. Thank you.
Today I'm going to present on Amir Khusro Dehlvi, A Queer Gaze from Delhi Sultanate. It is a presentation that highlights some of the themes that I have used in my historical fiction novel. So why is my novel worth writing? So this novel is actually inspired by the life of Amir Khusro Dehlvi, who was a 13th, 14th century poet of medieval northern India. He is considered to be the voice of India. He was called Tutiya-Hind, which means parrot of India. He was a polymath, prolific, polyglot poet, writer, Sufi musician, and a statesman. So the most remarkable thing about this person is that as a statesman, he survived the reign of 13 rulers. Most of them came to power after killing each other. And he actually had a very stable position in the royal court. And he was also connected with the common people as well, because he was connected with the Sufi saint Nizamuddin Aulia, and he was a devout disciple of Nizamuddin Aulia. Thus, his life provides us insights into the political, social, and literary milieu of the Delhi Sultanate, which is like 13th, 14th century medieval northern India. So, although I'm working on many themes, but what is the most remarkable thing about this particular person? So there is historical silence about women in general in the historical sources of the Delhi Sultanate. But Amir Khusro not only writes about women, he also writes as a woman. So we find some really intricate themes in his poetry and in his works of prose, just as gender ventriloquialism, androgyny, homoeroticism. However, since he's seen as a saint and as a revered Sufi in South Asia, in India and Pakistan, so many of our friends say that all the above mentioned themes are just symbolic. They're just Sufi symbolism of divine bride, and there is nothing physical involved in it. When we read about his life, when we read him as a prose writer and as a poet, we find many contradictions in his work. So there is empathy and antipathy for women is in his work. So interestingly, when he writes as a conservative father, he tells women to observe parda, which is seclusion, not to sit near men. And, the pious women are like pearls. They should always be shielded by something, and they should always be covered. But when in his ventriloquist poetry he writes as a woman, he is like a lovelorn woman who would do anything to get attention of his or her lover. And then we have his homoerotic poetry, which is very explicit, as you can see. However, he also says that, he introduces a category of bad women, and he says that holy water can actually purify anything except for bad women. People should never trust them, especially men, and they will burn in the deepest pits of hell. He himself was a cross-dresser who decked like a bride and who wore all these bell anklets and danced to please his Sufi master. However, since he was this high government official as well, so he hated prostitutes. So in his writing, he says with pride that I made a prostitute, a certain very popular prostitute, have a walk of shame in the city, and then I got her punished also, because I do not understand these women who do not belong to any man. So the methodology that I'm using to write my novel, I actually feel that sometimes fact is more interesting than fiction. But in the medieval sources, there is also a historical silence. So what I do is that I try to fill these historical silences by extrapolating and also by borrowing from other Persianate and Arab cultures. So I'm trying to create a story which is both beautiful and informative for my readers, and I hope I succeed. And thank you. I will leave you with a small excerpt from Amir Khusro's writing, and that is all about my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fouzia. I can't wait to read the novel, actually. I think this sounds really great. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce Professor Patricia Kingori, and someone working with her, Alici Parinella. I've got the pronunciation right today. I always forget, but and they are working with the British Film Institute as part of a larger collaboration. So if you could come up to the podium, it would be lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the organisers and all the Torch team for their work in putting this together. It's really great to hear some of the other projects, and I think as I present a little bit more about this project, you'll start to see some of the overlaps. I'm another person that's mentioning interdisciplinary in their project. So this is I'm presenting on the After the End project. The After the End project is really a project that tries to understand people's experiences of time, and in particular asks the question, who gets to say when something has ended and what happens after to populations that's living in the aftermaths of official endings when sometimes they feel that those endings haven't arrived for themselves. So we're looking at, it's an interdisciplinary group based all around the world. So in particular Brazil, where we're looking at women who are still caring for children who've got Zika, who are infected by the Zika virus. In Sierra Leone, we're looking at multiple endings. So not only is it a post-conflict setting, but it's also a place that has had the Ebola outbreak, COVID, and one of Africa's largest landslides. All of these things have officially been declared over, and yet populations and communities are still trying to align their experiences with this end that is yet to arrive. And also a large component of the project is in China and Southeast Asia, and we're looking at these different ideas of endings. So just a quick insight into some of our aims. So we're really trying to document carefully and explore some of the lived experiences of time and temporality of endings in global health crises, trying to capture these kind of counter narratives and implications for future practices and responses. And I mean, we are looking at these in a kind of international setting, but some of these ideas are really very close to home. So I live very close to Grenfell, and it's been 7 years. And, you know, we're living in lots of areas, not only people, you know, we've had like 30 years since Hillsborough, some of these really big events where they've been kind of over, but for the population involved, they're still trying to make a life in the aftermath and for an end that has yet to arrive. So we're really keen to look at how we can make sense of this. And the second aim is really trying to think about what we can do once we've documented all of these things, to really try to make a case for obligations and responsibilities of global health institutions to take these ends seriously. So what we know at the moment legally is that there's actually a really short window of time that many groups can make a claim if they feel that something bad has happened, a crisis has happened, or an event has happened that the state, for example, hasn't managed very well. And most people, by the time they've kind of garnered the resources, they're kind of timed out. And so what we're really interested in looking at is that can we have some of this evidence to maybe create a different kind of sense of obligation for global health institutions. I'm just going to quick plug today, the Guardian newspaper is running a survey that we've constructed to really try and understand how we feel time when the clocks change. So the clocks change at the end of the week. So we're doing the survey before and after, and the survey went live today. We've already had nearly 5,000 responses, so people are obviously very keen to talk about how time changes affect their sense of well-being. So it's not only is it an interdisciplinary project, but really from the beginning, we're trying to embed collaborations with different groups. So we've got a poetry competition that's just ended, but that was an international poetry competition where people were to speak to the themes of the project. And yeah, we had a huge response to that as well. And we're working with different artists. And so we're also working with the BFI. So I really want to thank Dr. Victoria McGuinness, who isn't here, but she's been absolutely instrumental in making this happen because this is one of the first projects of its kind that the BFI have actually done. So we're working with them for the next 8 years. really to try, and they've given us access to all their archives over that time, to really look at some of the questions that we're interested in after the end in their archives. One of the first things that we did was really to look at how are, pandemics and emergencies described and looked at in films. Kelechi, one of the postdocs on the project, wrote an amazing blog for that. And I'm going to hand over really quickly to Alicia, who's going to talk about the work that she's been doing, as well, looking specifically at Empire Women in Films in their archives.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. My contribution also stemmed from a collaboration with the BFI, but I focus more on the aftermath of both environmental disasters, as well as the aftermath of British colonialism and how that was represented on film in the BFI collection. And what I found out is that we have this underlying trend of artists reworking and re-engaging with the archive of the films that we already have and using it to tell different stories that question the idea of first temporal linearity, but also of the end of the archive itself, because they present films that have different temporal linearities. They look back at the past. They present different types of futurities, but also they question the idea of the end of the archive by looking at other BFI films as well. So in this way, the archive is no longer a sort of fixed monolithic identity, but rather a continuous entity, something that's in a perpetual becoming. And I look at films by artists such as John Akomfra, Kibu Tavares, Onyeka Igwe, and I looked at how they look back at older materials and rework them, questioning the idea, yes, of the fixity of the archive, but also of the idea of ending itself.
So we were told we only allowed 3 slides. I've actually put 4 slides in because I've went rogue a little bit. But I'm really happy to talk about this further, but it's just really great to be able to have this opportunity to present to you. So thank you very much.
Yes, lots of people have slightly exceeded the 3-slide brief, but that's okay because we're in good time. So now moving on, and more work with communities, and I'm really delighted to welcome Patrick McGuinness, Professor Patrick McGuinness, and Xin, I think is with you, yes? No, I am, yeah. And do come up to talk about your creative writing program with ARC-T. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, I'm Xin Nyam. I'm a creative art therapist and I work with ARC-T, and it's delighted to be part of this collaboration between Torch, MOX, and with, yes, Patrick, of course. Yeah, go ahead.
So what we've been doing is, in collaboration with the Museum of Oxford and with ARC-T, and Xin will tell you a little bit about ARC-T in a minute, is inviting people to come and write and explore their experiences under the kind of slogan, I suppose, of valuing the everyday. And we've been having these workshops, these writing workshops, in Templar Square Shopping Centre, which is not generally one of the great locations that features in the university's account of Oxford. And we've been working with the Museum of Oxford, which is also, by some strange parallel, not the museum that really features in the university's idea of the city. It is, in some senses, the Cinderella of Oxford's many prestigious museums. And I'm always amazed at how few of my students have even heard of it, let alone gone to visit it. And the Museum of Oxford is full of what we might call ordinary things. And it is like, in a sense, the sort of behind the tapestry of all the world treasures in the Ashmolean, the Museum of Science, and so on. The Museum of Oxford has ordinary things used by ordinary people whose experiences of these streets and this city are very, very different from the kinds of experience which, until recently, and thanks largely to groups like Torch, the university has thought of and told about itself in terms of narrative stories and validating experiences. I think of it, and with Xin, we've been developing this idea of big pasts and small pasts. You know, there are big pasts like sarcophagi and things like that in the Ashmolean, which, you know, however old they are, tend to look after themselves because they're prestigious. Then there are small pasts, which tend to disappear and get forgotten, except they're not forgotten. They exist in people's minds and identities and sense of themselves and their sense of the communities they live in, which is what we've been doing with ArcT in our workshops. And at this point, Xin is going to come in and tell us about ArcT and show us some of the slides.
Sure. So maybe on to the next slide. So at ArcT, we have two spaces in OX4. So that's one on Barnes Road and the other one in Templar Cowley, which we call the welcome space. So we hold lots of community events, community lunches where they're fully open to public, which goes from the range of maybe like 0 to 60, 70, anybody who can make their way in, yeah. And so ArcT is a local charity. If you don't know us yet, go find out, please. It's a wonderful place that really champions creativity. So using creativity for well-being, which I'm very proud to say as an art psychotherapist, yeah, my trade. And so these are some photos of the objects that we could use and handle in the sessions, thanks to Museum of Oxford. And they were very integral in the impetus of our writing prompts and themes. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was partly about giving voices to objects as well, you know. So as I recall, we had an extraordinary monologue from the Victorian bathing suit. The driving wheel told us a great deal about all the places you could escape to, thinking about, for example, as our group reflected incidentally, what the car might have meant back when that was a new car and what the car now means, you know, this kind of traffic jam causing, class conflict inducing, LTN type source of perpetual and seemingly intractable conflict between people, generations, classes, all of the things which in a sense our group was discussing and coming up with incredibly powerful and often very moving pieces of writing. One of the things that I learned was that I should listen to Xin more by having really quite specific exercises. So I would come in saying, yeah, we're now going to write and think, but Xin would say, no, actually, we need to have specific tasks. So one of them was to write about Oxford and one's experience of Oxford in terms of haikus, which was terrific. The absolutely inspired one, which I'm also happy to give credit to Xin, was to get the daily information sheet, right, which has been going for, how long did we work out? A century now, isn't it?
We're celebrating 60 years.
60 years, yeah. And people began to write about, you know, things that were on sale. So we had a rather lyrical advert for a mattress, which someone was trying to sell in 1980. There was also a support group for vegetarians. This is in the 1970s, you know. So it was a way of looking at how tiny little objects, the kind of thing that the eye skirts over, can tell us something, not just about what changes, but what remains. And we are now, Xin and I, working on producing an anthology, thanks to Torch and thanks to ArcT, of these pieces of writing. And we'll keep you posted about the launch and the readings from our group. Perhaps Xin can tell us something about the different people who were in the group too, because it was an extraordinary cross-section of people who worked incredibly well together and became friends.
Yes. So we ran the group over 6 weeks.
Yeah.
The initial plan was 6 weeks, and it was 90 minutes each weekly, and so it was open to the public. We had 15 spaces, but these are free to attend courses, no major commitments. So I think there was a regular between like 6 to 8 people who came, and they formed friendships. So these is sort of some of the elements that we thought worked really well in the project. So we went with the theme of valuing the everyday, looking at our own experiences within the local context and also within global context, as because in Oxford there's so many streams, there's lots of migration from the general public, and so I think my role very much was to furnish and hold the space as a safe and playful area and sort of a step away from everyday life, and then let Patrick facilitate the writing, and then we'll together try and sort of nurture the creative juices. Yeah.
Yeah, and people who'd never written began writing. People who were scared of poetry began writing poetry with confidence and flair. And it all fitted into the ways we were trying to get other people and ourselves and Torch and the university to think about the city which we live in and share. For me, it was also, I know that ArcT, the space for Shinshin, is also a workplace, but for me it was quite poignant as well, because anyone who's recently been to Templar Square will feel that it is fading, isn't it? More and more of the shopping sort of places are closing. And in fact, we were based, weren't we, in one of the shops. Then there's the charity shops sort of coming and going, and then co-op leaving, and so on and so forth. So, it felt like something was also being enacted, I think, as well as being said by people, by the people who live with us in this city and have something to say about it. So yeah, it was hugely enriching. And, because this is also about research, my input into this is that I'm writing about ordinary things and how ordinary things get expressed, but also sort of denatured by poetry, notably poetry, and by writing. So I'm learning a great deal from it, which is also feeding into my thinking as an academic as well as a writer. Do we have one more slide? No, is that it?
Yes, I've kept it.
So soon. Thank you all very much, and thank you to Shinshin, and also the second person to say this, to Vicky McGuinness, who has been the inspiration and also for me the practical organizer, putting us in touch with all of these people. Yes. So thank you.
Thank you.
So it's now my pleasure to introduce the Fantasy Futures project, which is due to open shortly, but I'm sure we will hear more about this soon. And this is Professor Wes Williams, my predecessor in the role, and Phil Dines. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a project called Fantasy Futures, which has as its subtitle Imagining Immersive Innovation. And it's funded by the SIF Fund, so the Strategic Initiative Fund, which has as its brief, and I'm going to quote this because it's kind of interesting in relation to what we're doing, to accelerate the pace with which strategic research and creative project concepts can be developed with investable proposals. So for the humanities, it's kind of unusual work in that we're already thinking about going to the market right from the beginning of the project. And one of the things that this project is about is how to connect, therefore, with the gaming industry and also with the sort of visitor experience industry. And it connects so strongly with a whole bunch of things that have been talked about today already, because it's also about Oxford as a place and how do we reimagine Oxford as a place that's more inclusive. So immersive here also means inclusive for us, and that tells a wider range of stories than the ones that we in the university are used to telling. Perhaps, Phil, you could say a little bit about your role. So Phil is the project manager. The others involved are Vicky McGuinness, again, and also Alex Koch, who's there at the back, whose title is the Theatre and Performance Research Partnerships Manager, because this is also involves a bit of theatre. But Phil, if you could say a bit about your role and explain who the folks on the slide are as well. Thanks.
Hi, yeah, so as Wes says, I'm Phil Dines, project manager for this project. I was brought in a couple of years ago, so it's a 2-year project, but with a view to extending beyond the end of this year. So we're looking, as Wes says, to potentially commercialise the project and looking to develop collaborations and potential investment to extend it further. So you can see some of the early sort of storyboarding that we went through. And then also the site that we managed to secure. We initially had some conversations with the Westgate Centre about having a unit within the Westgate as being part of the city itself. But I think actually the site that we secured is on the corner of George Street and Cornmarket. So it's prime city centre location in perhaps the area of the city that's had impacts as a result of the Westgate coming on stream. So it's an empty building, former NatWest building that we've taken over and will have as a pop-up public free public offering. I'm sure Wes will mention more about starting from the 11th of November, and you'll see details of that on your seats. So it's great to be able to bring to life this currently disused space in the same vein as what previous speaker was mentioning about trying to bring Oxford to life and counteract the sort of decline of the high street, I suppose, in some senses, and add to the cultural offering that the city has to offer. So you see the team there. That's Brian Mitchell on the left, who's our main tech guy here. Well, it's a disservice to call him that. He's our main contact within the gaming and previously worked as head of film studios at Rebellion, and is very deeply embedded within the whole gaming and immersive industries. So he has been invaluable in linking us up with people and getting mates rates for our limited budget. So the chap alongside him, that's is that Greg, I think, or Carl perhaps, who's been helping out to refit the space. Ian in the centre, Ian Warman, is the photographer and videographer who's going to be recording the whole event and offering creative input also. Vicky McGuinness, who's been name-checked several times through her Dr. Vicky McGuinness, integral involvement as head of public engagement within Torch, who, alongside Wes, set up the project and secured the funding. Wes and myself there alongside. So I'll hand back to Wes.
Thank you. Next slide, we're nearly there. So, yeah, there are various stages to this project. We've generated a story which involves, again, sort of not altogether unseen Oxford, but we're focusing on gargoyles. And the gargoyles are the storytellers of our story, partly because I've worked on gargoyles. I work on monsters and animal-human hybrids throughout history, but also because they are kind of unseen much of the time. So one of the things we would simply, if people go away from this experience going, oh, look, up there a bit more, then we've already done quite a lot of work. But Phil's already sort of named some of the partners, and that's Brian. The other person, that picture over there is Ed from a sound studio called Sound Suite in Chipping Camden. The others involved are Vicon, who have not lent us, but given us, again, mates rates really for mocap, and also, very excitingly, markerless mocap for people who are in the business. It hasn't really been used yet, but it's being used, and it will be used as part of our project. And then we're also... the building, I should say, is very generously loaned to us by the Islamic Studies Institute, thanks to the director, Farhan Nizami, for facilitating that. And then lastly, we've got some actors. I myself, there we are, I'm in the mocap kit, but there's also Uton Daly and Amantha Edmead from the Unlock the Chains collective here in Oxford, who will be involved. And it's all being put together this very week, finally, the actual, the kind of, the sound and the lights and the images are all being, what I believe is called implemented this week. So it's another partnership about networks and relationships, about Oxford, and about bringing humanities research into a kind of public space. I guess what makes it different, like I said right at the beginning of this, is that this is a prototype. So you'll be welcome to come along from the 11th to the 24th of November in that building, the former NatWest building. It's a prototype. It's an experiment in what we might then do later if this works at a much broader and a different scale of both tech and also actually narrative. Because when you're working with this many different partners, it's hard to control the narrative, as I have discovered. But it should be. I mean, it'll be great. you'll get to see all sorts of things that you wouldn't otherwise see. And I hope you'll come along. There are little cards on your seat where you can with a QR code where you can sign up for a slot if you would like to come. But thank you to Phil, thank you to Vicky, and thank you to all the others involved in this project.
And so finally, I'd like to invite Abby and Rachel to come up to speak about the project on conversational learning. Thank you.
I'm Rachel. I'm the project manager for conversational learning, which is another of Torch's Strategic Innovation Fund projects alongside Fantasy Futures. And conversational learning, which is led by Professor Abigail Williams, is exploring interactive digital resources, AI-powered resources for secondary school English teaching. It's a 2-year project, which actually started back in November 2022. So we are literally 2 weeks from the end date of the project. And with that in mind, what I wanted to do today is give a kind of quick overview of everything that has happened during the project, but with a particular focus on what we've learned about innovation and particularly kind of commercial innovation to touch on Wes's point along the way. So conversational learning grew out of a few small English literature prototypes, and these are just a couple of screenshots from the first of them, which was called Will Play. Will Play was made in collaboration with an Oxford-based tech company called Charisma AI, and it was an interactive resource designed to make GCSE Shakespeare more accessible. So you could kind of message the characters taking on different roles. Our prototype was Romeo and Juliet, and along the way you'd kind of learn about points of language, about the plot, and we were kind of drawing in a slightly cheesy way on kind of like social media sort of tropes. We were really excited about this project. We'd come across this technology platform, and it seemed like a really obvious kind of meeting point between the research, the literature, and this technology that allowed you to create kind of interactive conversations. Lots of people that we spoke to about it were really excited about it as well. Friends, colleagues, some kind of teacher friends that we knew. And it seemed like a sort of a new but kind of obvious way of making difficult, distant literature texts more accessible. So that was the plan. At the start of conversational learning, we were going to take this idea that we'd had with Will Play and with a couple of other prototypes, refine it through user feedback, working with teachers, find a publisher, a distributor, and kind of help take it to schools. That seemed, that was our kind of our 2-year roadmap. However, we quickly realized that it wasn't going to be that simple. When we started to run focus groups with teachers, kind of larger groups of teachers that weren't necessarily friends of ours, mainly working within Oxfordshire schools, but some schools all over the country as well. What we heard from them was that while they could see that Will Play was fun, it just wasn't really very useful to them. It didn't align clearly enough with the learning objectives that they have to kind of demonstrate. There was no way of it measuring student progress through it. And they were kind of saturated, particularly with Shakespeare revision resources already, because there are so many kind of cultural institutions out there, the Globe, the RSC. They kind of said, this is great, but we don't have space for it. We don't have time for it. It's not what we need. So we kind of had to go back to the drawing board and think about, what do we have in terms of technology? What have we been hearing from teachers through this consultation process? And what can we make that might sort of be useful to them? So we came up with a few different ideas. One of them, which were kind of based on what we'd been hearing from teachers in these early feedback workshops on Will Play. One was a kind of creator platform model where students would get to essentially make their own versions of Will Play. One of the things we'd heard from teachers was that they wanted tools that help students to engage in more like creative and original ways with literature texts. Another was a kind of quiz-style resource where students could practice analysing unseen extracts and get feedback in a way that has previously been kind of automated for a lot of STEM subjects, but not really for humanities subjects so far. So we went through this kind of process of innovation where we would come up with a concept, present it to some teachers, get feedback, shift the concept slightly, present it to some teachers again. And through that, we kind of gradually moved closer to something that met their requirements and would be a useful classroom resource. A major shift that happened during this period was from English literature to English language. So we had learned from teachers and also through some market scoping consultancy that we were able to commission because of the SIF funding, that there is kind of a wealth of literature resources out there, Shakespeare in particular, but kind of English literature is quite well-resourced generally. Schools struggle a lot more with teaching English language. There isn't as much of a provision out there, and yet it's the compulsory qualification. So we shifted our focus to English language. At the same time, through the market scoping, we'd also identified a kind of another angle of interest, which was careers. So speaking to various education stakeholders, we learnt that schools have a kind of government-mandated obligation to deliver careers education in every single curriculum subject and to kind of demonstrate that they're doing this. And there aren't many resources out there to support this, particularly for humanities subjects. It's something that schools struggle with a lot. And so with the kind of this thinking about needing to find a sort of market gap and a commercial future for what we were doing, as with Fantasy Futures, this seemed like an opportunity to bring the sort of interactive technology alongside English language kind of learning, and then add in a careers angle, which would just potentially make what we were doing more useful to schools and a kind of more, for there to be kind of more tangible benefits for them. And it was actually by adding in this careers angle that we were able to identify a distribution partner, so an organization called MyPath, who are one of the few who specialize in specifically like careers in the curriculum support for schools. So there's lots of career support out there, but they help schools to kind of link all of the curriculum subjects to a whole range of careers pathways that you wouldn't necessarily have thought of. But they don't currently have a kind of interactive digital offering in their portfolio. So as we are kind of near the end of the SIF project, what we're working on now is setting up a small-scale limited pilot in sort of 5 or 6 secondary schools, a one-year pilot led by MyPath of an early version of the resource that we've developed through the SIF project. This will also be supported by Charisma AI, who continue to be the technology partner. And the aim of the pilot is to kind of gather feedback from students and teachers about how the resource is working for them, also to learn more about how schools are using it. And kind of if all goes well, we'd hope to be able to scale up further based on those findings. But we sort of need to put it in front of classrooms either way, because we kind of need to know, we've been playing with these ideas and this kind of interactive technology for a long time. So we kind of need to know, like, does it work for students? Is it something they're interested in? Can it kind of fly in a classroom setting? I have taken a screen recording of the current work in progress version of the pilot. It's not, I feel like it doesn't translate as well in video, and it's better if I could give you all a link and you could all play it. But we're nearly there, but we're not quite there yet. But the concept is that you're kind of given, so back 2 years ago, you were given a Shakespearean character role. Now you're given a kind of job scenario role. You get sent a piece of writing that your colleague is struggling with. You kind of help them with it, and then you do your own piece of writing. So the structure was there back with Will Play, but we've just had a shift in terms of content. Kind of like broadly mimic the types of online working environments that students a lot of students will kind of be moving into when they enter the workplace. Yeah, so just some kind of reflections on what we've learned over that period and sort of what's happened during the project. We've obviously moved a really long way from where we started with Will Play, and we've made a resource that we are hoping will reach some groups that the university doesn't kind of often get to engage with. So, maybe students who don't love our subject and who are kind of interested in it in more sort of functional ways. And I think that's something we've already seen from some of the talks today, that Torch already works really hard on to kind of reach different groups and kind of non-typical audiences. But it feels like this is kind of doing that as well. We've learned a huge amount about public engagement and kind of innovation processes along the way. We hope that some of that will be useful to future projects in this space. We've definitely learned that sort of moments of failure, like hearing that will play wasn't what schools were looking for, things that feel like dead ends or roadblocks and going back to the drawing board is all kind of part of the process of finding something that is useful. We've learned that being truly end user led can mean having to shift quite radically from what was your initial idea. And we found that actually going through the process of extensive stakeholder consultation, market scoping, the kind of work that's been facilitated by the SIF fund, for us is what has actually been necessary to create something that has a life beyond the end of the project funding. So we will make sure, although the project is ending, we'll make sure to kind of keep the project space online updated on the development of the pilot. And yeah, thank you all for listening.